Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call back from recess the U46 board and reconvening tonight at 6:37 for our October 20th, 2014 board meeting. I'd like to start by introducing, or everyone just introduce yourself, and I'll start here on my left-hand side with Principal Reardon.
Rob Reardon, Principal, Essex High School.
Jeff Goodrich, Athletic Director, Essex High School.
Brian Donahue, School Board Member and Vice Chair.
Judith Dunova, Superintendent.
Jack Bailendorf, Chairman.
Gary Baker, Board Member, Town of Essex.
Erin Knox, Board Member, Town of Essex Junction.
Liz Subin, Board Member, Town of Essex.
Bob Travers, Director, Center for Technology, Essex.
Grant Geisler, CFO.
Kathleen Barron, Director of Finance and Accounting.
Okay. Thank you all for being here tonight. We have visitors and staff to be heard, but I see no visitors and staff. Specifically, we have staff members here who are scheduled for presentations, but no items to be discussed here. So I'd like to move on then to our athletic director presentation with Jeff Goodrich. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a PowerPoint, but that doesn't seem to be up and running. I just printed it off. It's fine. I'll pass this around. It's just a cursory look in brief. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll also pass around the activities digest that I brought for you to review if you have not seen one in a while. So thank you for the opportunity to come and meet. Thank you for your service. A little bit about who I am. I am a first-year athletic director, so you're getting me rather green, finding my way, as I've told many. I'm excited about the opportunity and the challenges that are ahead. We are just finishing our fall season, regular season, moving into the playoff. Seedings came out today, and I can report that all of our teams represented us very well, competed well, and look strong heading into the playoffs. I think more importantly about who I am is I'm a community member myself with 3 children in the district. I'm an educator of 20 years, 19 of them here at the high school, formerly the social studies department as an American government, social studies and sociology teacher. I've coached for about 24 years, and many of those years here at the high school in both the basketball program, track and field programs, and the soccer programs. That led me to this exciting challenge and opportunity as the movement of our former athletic director created a void, and I excitedly moved into that position in June. Upon your request, I am here to introduce and share some thoughts about the digest, the majority of which I have inherited. I've been very well aware of it for all of my years, and I've participated on some of the changes over the last several years. The ultimate goal that we provide this is a framework for guiding behaviors of individuals and students as they navigate their high school experience and decide to participate in athletics and other activities. So it is often a work in progress. As you will see, it has had many iterations over the years. My predecessor reviewed it and had committees convene a total of 4 times in his 17 years at Essex as the athletic director. I participated in 2 of those sessions. The one most recently was kind of outlined on the back side a little bit, which took place in the winter and spring last year. And the people that were in attendance of that committee are listed for your perusal. I think much of the digest is very strong. I think it has had several changes as a result of the 4 reviews that took place. Some of those include modifying it to include criminal violations. Formerly, the criminal violations were not a part of our digest, as well as extending it to impact individuals that chose to provide some of the items that are in violation of our policy, and included a treatment program for individuals that may be removed from teams or activities as a result of their behaviors through our in-house SAP director. And it also included the addition of a panel to review violations that may have occurred, as opposed to it staying in the hands of just one individual. So we now work from a panel position. I am here and happy to answer any questions that I'm capable of answering before you. Some of them may take further time and research, but I do recognize the value of our digest and the importance of being actively reviewing it, as it has been done in the past. So, are there any questions? Yeah, Aaron.
So who gets this?
Any individual who is interested in participating in any extracurricular activities. So certainly all the student athletes. By design, it would also be received by individuals participating in clubs, as well as theater productions and whatnot.
So it's
I can assure you that the student athletes receive it and the parents of the student athletes. It's also posted on our website. I think we have reduced over the years the number of physical copies we've been creating, but it is available by web as well.
Jeff, what part of these policies are relevant to athletes opposed to the Japanese club and environmental club and so forth?
The academic eligibility and the training rules portion, I know consistently have been closely monitored within the athletic department. The athletic department does not oversee directly some of the other clubs that you referenced.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can speak to who is the overseer of some of those others. My understanding is by design, anyone within participation of any of those listed activities would be held in adherence of these, but I don't know beyond that. The couple of changes of note, I did reference that in the outline page. If you see italics in bold, those are additions and changes from last year to this year. I did make a few minor changes. One, under academic eligibility, I instituted a expectation that student athletes who are falling under probationary status be expected to submit an academic improvement plan in order to continue, and then even if they have not been able to continue with the team, there's an expectation that they will create an improvement plan to work towards greater academic achievements. And those are generated by the student athlete. We had 6 this fall that submitted student athlete improvement plans, academic plans, and monitored by me, and with regular follow-ups. And thus far, we've seen marked improvement out of 5 of those 6, and even the 6 has had reasonable improvements. So that was a change. And you'll also note on the training rules side, as a result of the last committee meeting on reviewing training rules, we added the vapor pens and electronic cigarettes and any inhalants to the list of violating apparatus.
So, I'm sorry, I'm gonna see if I can ask the question a different way to get a better understanding. So this is the Student Activities Digest for all interscholastic sports and activities. But not all activities fall underneath your office? Or not all activities have a central gravitational force to them? Is that right?
I believe that to be accurate
Okay. So
at this juncture.
at this juncture. So would it be fair to say that there might be a greater scrutiny on athletes that, or at least we could report, there is a central point of focus looking for compliance to the training rules and other aspects of this digest for athletes than anyone involved in, or for the students involved in the various Red Cross Club, robotics team, all those?
I think all of the clubs mentioned have advisors
Yep.
that are attempting to help the students engage in healthy behaviors. Each of them do carry responsibility to interact and share that information. I think you would find that the student athletes, because of the regularity with which they convene and meet, the amount of time that the coaches are working with them, there is probably greater probabilities that the messages of, healthy choices and providing a healthy learning environment is getting through,
Yep.
as opposed to a club. For instance, my daughter's in a club 7:30 in the morning on Wednesdays until 10 of 8. There's just a much more limited point of access.
Yep.
Therefore, they may not be as aware as to the functions of that,
Yep.
of that individual.
I would say that when consequences occur due to choice of behavior, regardless of whether the student is involved in athletics or other extracurriculars, the consequences do carry over. So whether or not it's perhaps someone having a possession violation, if you will, with a musical, there has been consequences to individuals where others have had to step forward and perhaps take that role in a production. There have been situations where there's a suspension relates to no participation in any co or extracurriculars, which would include a Red Cross club or a chess club or things of that nature. I think Jeff makes a good point. The scrutiny, perhaps just based on a 20-minute every week or every other week as compared to 6 days a week being involved with an athletic team, or a 6 day a week for 2 or 3 months in the musical is a different conversation, differentiated conversation, if you will, because of the nature of the times they meet throughout the duration of the activity.
Right.
I will add that, reflecting upon the last time that this group convened to review, there was great discussion. We met 4 times over the course of the winter and spring, approximately an hour each time. It was a diverse group, you can see, including students, former students, current students. Any of these references are the function they served within that time frame. So if it says a current student, they may now have graduated, but members of the Athletic Leadership Council have also spoke to this. And quite clearly, the current policies have been embraced by this diverse group, with some modifications. And the perspective of the students is always fascinating, because they will point to other schools and be more critical of schools that have what are perceived to be weaker rules And they often, when they discuss the equity of that, it is not a question that ours are too harsh, but that theirs are too weak. And it's very reassuring to hear that from a 17-year-old, because I think they do have a unique and obviously very important perspective. And that was certainly shared within this last meeting from the spring.
You know, I think the district policy for student behavior and discipline provides if it's a first offense, an individual can proceed with counseling and potentially only sit out 30 days. But the training rules extend beyond that.
Depending on when the infraction would occur, that would be correct.
Is there any instance when a student is able to be reinstated into the same season?
Not within our current model.
Yeah.
No.
So the 30 days for first offense would make it so that it was possible, but the current model doesn't make it possible to be reinstated.
Correct.
Were you aware of that kind of conflict between district policy and the training rules? And what do you think about that?
Is that a question for me, Brian?
Either one.
I was not familiar with that, to be clear. I don't know if it's a direct conflict. Certainly the way you presented it appears as so.
Yeah.
If
Well-
you were jumping in, I'll defer to you, but I think that when students knowingly, actively accept greater levels of expectation and embrace that opportunity, I don't know that it's a conflict.
Yeah, and I reserve judgment that if there is a conflict, it may be that our district policy needs to be adjusted. You know, I'm not.
I guess where
If
I would
there is
jump in
conflict.
on this is as follows, because I've been around here quite a while. And when I started here, to use just the frame of athletics, the laws were different, where a senior in particular, student athlete, at that time, could legally possess alcohol. And it was still against training rules, and you could be removed from the team. And now it's illegal. And I would not understand the logic of reducing that consequence when it's an illegal act in society. When back in 1980 through 84, and prior to 80, but I wasn't here prior to 80, it was legally possible for a person in high school at the age of 18 to not only possess but consume alcohol. But the training rules were no different. So that's kind of how I weigh and reflect on Essex High School over time. And not only Essex High School, because obviously that was the law that was in effect in Vermont, that was in place until 1984, when the federal government was going to withhold transportation funds to states who chose not to modify. So that's, on my thinking, that's how I have seen that play out over time.
Do you think there's a value to the community and to the students to have a higher standard while somebody is participating in a privilege? Whether it's an activity or whether it's a sport?
I think it's important to give students consistent messages of expectations of behavior and accountability and healthy choices.
All students? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think Jeff referenced the 4 in Ed Hockenberry's time reviews that have been conducted. And I would just say that the thoroughness of this most recent one is consistent with the previous reviews that have been done. And the outcomes of the committee, their recommendations have been the same, which includes student voice, which I think is an important thing to also consider. Because of course they weigh in at their age, and they also are acutely aware of the local control issue, which the VPA really wants the local schools to have, specifically being training rules and academic eligibility. Those are not state, those are
Oh,
local.
even academic eligibility is per district.
Absolutely,
Oh.
absolutely.
And I would imagine this criminal civil, if that's a new one for us, that must be also local.
It
locally-
varies from,
Locally influenced,
Yes.
or locally determined.
yes, it does. So the student voice in this is noteworthy, I would say,
Mhm.
over time.
Do I ask any other questions, or is that your line, Jack?
No, no, are there other questions for our athletic director?
I think the only other question I just had was, has anybody ever thought about just doing a separate one for the athletics and then a separate one for the clubs? It just seems like there is a lot of language in here that really is pertinent just to the athletics. I don't know whether that's just creating more work, but I just wondered if from the presentation standpoint and just maybe keeping it for the kids and the activities, it would be a little bit of a more streamlined, focused. But I know that that would
Certainly
be
could.
probably a time, you know, sort of a time-consuming thing, but
Certainly could be considered.
I know one of the challenges that Jeff is learning about and Ed experienced, and Bruce Wheeler before Ed, was the wonderful opportunities the community provides our kids in terms of the number, both in terms of athletics and clubs, and the wonderful fine arts extracurricular opportunities that are provided. And earlier questions in regards to the oversight, it's a good question because the numbers we have are really good in the sense that they're large. They also are problematic in terms of the general oversight of all that goes on, which is a real good thing for our kids and the community.
well, and maybe the good point of having it together too is that if you do have a student who's doing both, then they would have.
That's true. And there are many
But-
students that do not only multiple sports, but are involved in, multiple activities.
And then that would involve, if you did two, then that would involve 2 sign-offs? So,
Yes.
essentially.
And I think over time, various school boards have heard how the overall GPAs of students that are involved are consistently higher than students that choose not to partake in extra and co-curriculars, which further, I think, reinforces the validity of these opportunities being learning opportunities and having value to student achievement. And I commend Jeff for coming in his first few months, instituting the student athlete learning plans for those that are treading a fine line of becoming ineligible. I think
That's
that's
great.
very commendable.
Okay.
Very good.
So, a question for you then, Principal Reardon. Jeff Goodrich, by title, is our athletic director. Is that correct?
Yes.
But by practice, does the athletic director then hold dominion over other student activities that are not necessarily athletic? So if, for example, I'm in the chess club, well, maybe that's not a good, if I'm in a poetry out loud is one of them, right? And I have academic issues that if I look here at the policy, it would say that the athletic director then is part of the satisfying athletic activities eligibility requirements. So for those arts-related or foreign language or astronomy or computer clubs or those kinds of things, does that fall underneath the responsibility of what the athletic director does in terms of understanding eligibility requirements?
No.
Okay.
What the athletic director has done, based on the positive proliferation of opportunities, would be involved in initial communications with finding out which clubs and activities are going to be occurring
Okay.
in the respective academic year, because sometimes, I can think of two from last year, clubs that are hit hard by graduation, there's no interest, so the club dies.
Dissipates, right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there are others that spring up
Sure.
and are brought forth, and they meet with me, and then they come before the board to be recognized, and then eventually they may or may not get in the queue for funding and
Right.
things of that nature. So then those, by policy, those clubs and activities that are funded and advisors get stipends, we get, working with human resources, we get contracts out.
Right.
And then
Right.
it would be the advisors who would be doing the overseeing of aforementioned students.
And
But
and-
once again, to use the example,
Right.
if there was a violation of alcohol or something along those lines, when a student, through due process, is found to be guilty of such behavior, then their opportunities to participate are curtailed based
Right.
upon the event and what they are or are not involved with, whether it's athletics or fine arts or chess club or
Mhm.
poetry out loud.
Do you think there's parts of this policy that some of the community members struggle with?
I wouldn't venture to know, but I would say probably some, yeah, yeah.
Any, which, I mean, you've been, as you introduced, you've been here for a while. What, is there a particular one that people seem to struggle with the most?
Well, that I can't speak to because I haven't heard personally of dissatisfaction with the digest. I just know that there are, based on its contents, touchy areas that perhaps not all are in agreement with.
Yeah.
I mean, just, academic eligibility, there are some in the building that would say if you have one failing course, one should not be able to participate, or you should have a GPA of a certain level, or some say what we have is fine because it encourages students to take risk in courses, and if they fail one, then it's not the end of the line. They can choose to
Yep.
remedy that situation. So I'm just using academic eligibility. There are many different opinions or weigh-ins on that, which certainly there's not a universal feeling on that.
Yeah.
And there are different across the state in terms of academic eligibility.
Do you think that's one of the things that might bring the air up, is that sometimes that difference between academic eligibility at one high school versus another, or a training rule at one high school or another? Is it the differences that raise I mean, it seems like this has been reviewed 4 times on a comprehensive basis using parents, teachers, coaches, educators, students, alumni. And this continues to be, and it's almost exactly in keeping with our district policy. There aren't a lot of differences, even with the expectation that we have on athletes versus we have on every student, which, ideally, if it's good for these students, then let's spread the good, right?
Mhm.
So we don't want to have too many different policies.
Right.
But when we move outside of that sort of isolated individual look, is it sometimes the differences that cause the community to be inquisitive?
I don't know if I'd say inquisitive could be a choice of words. I guess because everyone goes into participation eyes wide open, and the fact that there have been modifications over the years, but for many of the key tenets of said provisions, they've remained fairly constant. I don't think there are any surprises. There may be some disagreements, but based upon the feedback of the committees that have been held, it hasn't risen to a level where there have been pressing need for significant modifications.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I guess it's not having a standard. We have a standard of concussions by the Vermont Principals Association, and now by the legislature, that is very prescriptive. I mean,
Mhm.
down to an FTE,
Yep.
down to training,
Yes.
down to the number of hours of training,
Mm-hmm.
including for referees and everything. So
Absolutely.
they are clear that when there is a matter to be addressed, they will be extremely prescriptive.
Mhm.
Correct.
But there's no standard at these local control issues of academic eligibility, training rules, drug alcohol infringements, and so forth. There's no.
And the latest area of local control is the loyalty clause in most recent.
Oh, that isn't a VPA? That's local? So
The
some schools-
consequences for the loyalty clause are to be enforced at the school level,
Oh,
not the VPA level.
I didn't realize that.
Yep.
That is also one of the changes to
This year, as
this
compared
year.
to last
It's
year.
also included in there.
Yep.
But I think, as Rob has alluded to, the interpretation and application of it remains a local control issue.
Does that make your job harder?
Where's my baseline?
Opposed to.
It's a good question.
Well, I think that ends up being, if that is the case, the board deals with those kinds of matters with legislation, Department of Ed, Vermont Principals Association, Vermont School Boards Association, a lot better than it does in wordsmithing of school-based procedure. So, looking for direction from the administration on, where that disparity between schools and consequence between schools, I can absolutely attest to, builds energy inside of our community. Because we all go with a certain set of rules to have our competition, which is part of our scholastic sports, but the rules outside of those lines can influence the how things happen inside the lines.
Mhm.
And that becomes confusing for people.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We decided to have these 4 NFL linebackers play on our team because locally we can control that or something. It's the hard part to understand. Is that a place for the board to be focusing on? To look for more standardization?
I guess standardization would be an interesting definition, given the varying degrees of interpretation of academic eligibility and training rules.
I think that might be a good place for the Vermont Principals Association to look. I
Yeah.
think that's more of a state.
I think that's where I was kind of asking for direction for advocacy and for becoming more informed of, with the Vermont Principals
Mhm.
Association. That we,
And we have representatives. In fact, aren't you on the athletic? Or you
I'm on
used
the
to be?
Activity Standards Committee.
Activity Standards Committee.
Yep. actually have a meeting tomorrow, I'm not clear.
So is there an opportunity to influence the activities, standardization of?
I certainly can bring it up, and I'll be happy to report back the response I get. Yes.
This is sort of a Vermont legacy of local decision-making that we have. And the Principals Association has put forth many of the rules. Each of the sports have a whole rule book that comes with it. I think that's what they standardized. But I think that they've given this back to the locals to figure out based on the climate and culture of their school and their community.
Well, another topic that's percolating, not that I want to digress, but is the whole recruitment issue as it relates to athletics and how school choice is helping or hindering or exacerbating the situation.
Mm.
And if the money follows the student, what impact will that have from just an athletic lens moving forward?
Yeah.
And who can say what to whom, whether you're a public, private, or religious?
Well, and if you believe that it plays a key role in the development and education of your kids, then, and it's about having a sports program or not because of outward migration, it's like trying to save music, right? I mean, it's,
No, I'm just saying, with this, it's only the tip of the iceberg
yeah.
in terms of school choice,
Mm-hmm.
as it relates to athletics.
And I think our long legacy of local control does exist, but it has been eclipsed by a lot less. And when there's instances like concussions, those are issues that we don't look for consensus
Mm-hmm.
or agreement. We just say, this is what's going to happen.
I'm sure that in life-threatening situations or circumstances like that, there would be, where in other places that don't have that level of severity attached to them.
The safety factor.
Safety factors are pretty clear.
Yeah. Drug and alcohol policy is a
Yeah.
pretty major.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you, Jeff, for coming and presenting to us tonight. Speaking for myself, this is very useful to see. I was aware of its existence.
Sure.
And frankly, it's been a couple of years since
Understood.
I've had students of my own going through these activities, so it's nice to understand what those rules and regulations are that we're looking at, so thank you.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity.
Okay.
I am very interested in the rest of your agenda, but I do have another obligation up at Fleming, so I'm going to make my way to that.
Boy, that's graceful.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Thank you for the
Jeff.
opportunity.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Take care.
JV just lost to Rutland by 4 points.
Aw.
Sorry.
Look at you, right on the cutting edge.
Wow.
No, there is a thing here, Liz, on Essex High School encourages safe and responsible student behavior with regards to internet use and inappropriate use of social networking sites. Okay, so maybe we should extend that to board members also. So keeping track of what's happening in the middle school scores there. Okay, moving on. The FY14 year-end financial report. Grant, you're here. And Kathy, you're here tonight too to take us through this, so.
Sure.
Where-
I'll start with the FY14 year-end reports. Kathy is actually going to be helping me go through the budget process this
Okay.
year, so she's here
So,
for that. as well.
and I would just suggest items 4 and 5 on here, the year-end financial review and the budget discussion, you just manage how you see fit, okay?
Sure, we'll start with the year-end reports, and the quarterly reports have typically been provided in the board's organization notes as an update item, as you're well aware, and board members have reviewed the information and passed along any questions to me. However, we've been asked to briefly provide reports during your board meetings to make sure that the public is aware that you actually receive and review this information. The FY14 reports that you received are not officially considered final because we haven't gone through the the independent financial audit, but hopefully there won't be many changes to them. We'll start with the high school, where it appears we used about $301,000 of the $710,000 fund balance, which leaves $409,000 to roll forward as a revenue in the FY16 budget. The surplus was largely in the areas of salaries and benefits, but we also came in under budget in areas like supplies, equipment, and utilities. We finished over budget in a few areas. One was the high school choice agreement that's sunsetting with South Burlington. We also finished slightly over budget in some special education lines like outside placements, but the special ed costs we received partial reimbursement for. As an aside, you may have noticed that there's large variances under miscellaneous revenue and debt expense, and that's only because we have to show the use of the state construction aid. So that's why you see a higher revenue, because we're showing the application of that state construction aid, and you're showing a corresponding increase in the debt service. When we budget, we just budget for the net effect. Moving on to the tech center, we didn't tap into the $325,000 fund balance at all, and we still had a positive net position of about $60,000, which means that we have about $385,000 to roll forward as a revenue in FY16's budget. On the revenue side, we collected about $30,000 more than we budgeted, since we charged the full announced tuition rate. If you went back to last year's budget, you'd see that in order to balance the budget, we didn't actually need the full announced tuition rate, but we did charge the full amount. So that's why we had a little bit more in tuition revenue than the budget shows. On the expense side, we finished under budget by about $170,000 in salaries and benefits, with health insurance being the largest area of under execution. We also had some level of surplus in almost every line, because the money gets distributed and we assure that we don't go over budget. So we do have minor over or under execution in several places. Like supplies, I think, was maybe the most significant. The good news is that according to the preliminary allowable tuition calculation that we just received from the AOE, we did not exceed the 3% threshold, which is good news.
Very good news.
So we won't be looking at having to refund anything. And as we start going through the budget process, I'm sure Bob will be looking at this higher than usual fund balance, and we'll probably be looking at maybe a one-time requirement that we can invest in so that we don't have this roller coaster wave going. So that's it, just briefly on the year-end reports. Be glad to take any questions if anybody has any.
Does the tech center currently have a reserve in the fund balance for?
Not like a committed fund balance. We've used all of the committed fund balance in both the high school and the tech center. I think last year we used the last of it. I think it was only like $19,000 to use up the last of it. Anything else? Want to move on to the budget?
Yes.
Okay, for the FY16 budget, just to kind of refresh us on where we are, the budget worksheets are going to actually be distributed to the high school and the tech center administration, at least, at the beginning of November, which, yeah, it's like the week after next, so I'm going to have to work on that. The first draft of the budget will be presented to you on, I believe, January 5th. Your meeting materials included about a 4-page information sheet that talks about legislative issues, tax factors, and some assumptions for various budget areas. And it also just throws out what the proposed budget guidance might be. I'm not going to go through that whole 4-page document, but I will touch on some of the issues and then take questions afterwards. Some of the legislative issues that may cause budget challenges, and I think we've talked about some of these, but just to refresh your memory, one, dual enrollment opportunity, the fact that we need to budget for 50% of the cost for dual enrollment for students that are going out to an external source. 2 is personalized learning plans, beginning with all 9th graders and then any dual enrolled students. And 3, changes to the excess spending threshold, which anchors forever the threshold to FY14's statewide education spending per pupil. And then it's only going to be increased by inflation, and then is multiplied by a factor of 123%. I know that's a lot of information, but the point of this is that the excess spending threshold used to always be related to the most previous year. So if statewide budgets went up 5%, then you had a 5% cushion. But now, since they've nailed it to just FY14, from now on, it's only going to be the inflationary adjustment. So if statewide budgets go up 5%, we're still only going to be looking at like a 2.1% inflation factor that will be held to. The other thing that changed is the factor used to be 125%. Now it's 123. In FY17, I believe it drops to 121%. So the legislature has made it a lot more challenging to stay under the excess spending threshold, which, as you know, if you exceed that, then you're basically taxed for $2 for every dollar over. So that is going to be a pretty significant issue, not for us, not for FY16, probably not in 17, but in 18 or 19, we're going to have to start really looking at this. Tax factors are on the second page. The tax commissioner should make their recommendation in December. We are expecting a base rate increase of 5 cents or more. This year, as you remember, it went up 4 cents. We're being told it could be 5 cents or more for FY16. The high school's equalized pupil count will probably drop by about 2%, somewhere between 1.5% and 2%, I'm guessing. And that will put some stress on our per pupil spending and on the tax rate calculation, as you know. Salaries and benefits make up, I'm sorry, I'm trying to go back to here. Let me see. I'm sorry. Assumptions. Back to the bottom of page 2. Some of the assumptions for specific budget areas. On the revenue side, the fund balance, as I mentioned, will be about $409. That's $125,000 lower than this year. So that's a bit of a challenge, but we did overcome the challenge last year when fund balance dropped to $175, so it's not quite as bad as last year. The number of tuition students will likely continue to decline along with tuition revenue. Salaries and benefits are the largest part of our expense. To determine staffing levels, we'll look at enrollment projections, class size parameters, and student needs, as we always do. Contracts are in place, so we don't need to make any salary assumptions. We've been told that health insurance rates should increase at about the same level as this year, which was 4.5%. So we're going to start by using a factor of 5% until we get a final number. Special education requirements will be based on the service plan, which was just completed, and unfortunately seems to indicate a fairly significant increase for outside placements for U46. So we'll have to see how that plays out. As a reminder, most of the special education costs will be reflected as an assessment, a special ed assessment, because we have to show those costs broken out in the SU. At the bottom of page 4, we have the proposed budget guidance, which is consistent with prior years, maintaining the high level of educational quality, supporting the school action plan, being sensitive to the burden on taxpayers by presenting a budget with minimal increase in education spending for the high school and minimal increase in tuition rate for the tech center. And then also, we want to preserve the physical plant. Later in your agenda, you'll be discussing the 2004 Unified Union Study, and your org notes included a chart showing FY15 tax rates for the 3 communities of CCSU and Essex Town, along with the impact of a tax rate incentive that could have been gained by combining CCSU and Essex Town school districts into a single pre-K-12 regional education district, or RED. While this information is very interesting, and it should be considered for the future, especially with additional incentives for study and transitional costs, it is not something that we can factor into the FY16 budget, because the timeline to form a RED just would not, we wouldn't be able to do it even if everybody was lined up. It just wouldn't be able to happen in time. So that is not something that we'll be considering in the FY16 budget development. I'll be glad to take some of your questions now. Obviously, this isn't the only bite at the apple, because as we go through our work sessions, you'll have plenty of opportunity for redirecting as we move along. But if you have any questions up front, I'll be glad to try to field those.
Was it last year that we did the 2 votes? Or was that 2 years ago?
It was 2 years ago, and that law has
Gone away.
sunsetted.
Sunset.
Right. So last year, we did not have the 2-vote language. It was 2 years ago.
Maybe, I don't know when it would be appropriate, but I would love, could you just explain a little bit about the incentive? Just a little bit about what that's about? I don't know whether you want to do that now or.
Sure. Yep, well, it's up to you. I can talk about the chart briefly now if you want. As I mentioned, it's not an FY16 issue. It might kind of encroach a little bit on your future agenda item. Is that okay?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's under, we do have it on the agenda.
am I jumping ahead on the agenda?
But we could,
I
I
could
think it
just
makes
talk
more
about the
sense
chart
to
real
talk
briefly.
about the
Sure.
chart now, though.
So if you can, I'm not sure what page it is in your org notes, but there is a chart titled FY15 Tax Rate Comparison. And what that chart is you'll recognize kind of the left side of that. It starts with the total expense budget minus your non-property tax revenues plus your capital plan to equal your education spending. So basically, this is the tax rate calculation that we show you every year. And so you have education spending divided by the pupils gives you your spending per pupil, divided by the base education amount gives you your spending adjustment, times a base rate gives you your equalized homestead tax rate. And then if it's like for the high school, you've got to multiply by the percentage of kids who are in high school grades. And if it's a K-8 district, then you have to multiply by the percentage of kids who are pre-K-8. So that's why there's that other row stuck in there. And then you have what's called the final equalized homestead tax rate for each of the districts that we're talking about. Westford is $1.51. EJ, you have to take the 53.9 cents under U46 and add it to the pre-K 8 98.9 cents to come up with what the total EJ blended rate would be, which is shown below at $1.52.9, so basically $1.53. Same thing for the Essex Town tax rate. You take the Essex Town 912, which is 55.7 cents, and then the pre-K 8 rate, which is 96.6, and so the total Essex Town tax rate would be $1.52. So what I wanted to do is, before we go into this too much, I just wanted to see, are the 3 districts' tax rates fairly similar? Because if they're not, then you're going to have someone who's a perceived loser in this and someone who's a perceived winner, getting more of a break. So it was interesting when I did this to see that all the tax rates are between $1.51.4 and $1.52.9. So they're all within about a penny and a half. So everybody's pretty close, which is a lot different than in 2004 when this was looked at before. So then what I did was I took that very last column, I averaged all of those tax rates together, and the average is $1.52.4. So if this was a red, that's what would become the tax rate for our communities. It would be $1.52. So it'd be a little higher than what Westford's current one was, a little lower than what EJ's was, but it'd be very similar. And then what you would be able to do, based on the legislation, is you would be able to take an 8-cent tax reduction off of that. So the tax rate would drop to $1.44. So the tax rate would have been $1.44, and the way it was, FY15, the lowest tax rate that we had was $1.51. So $1.44 is a pretty big gain for every district, even the one who had the lowest tax rate.
That's just for the first year?
That's for the first year. The second year, the way the language works is you get a 6-cent reduction. The third year, 4 cents. The fourth year, 2 cents. So to put that into context, the notes, I included notes here saying if we had a $1.44 tax rate, if we wanted to get to that, Westford would have had to cut $210,000 out of their budget to get down to that. In Essex Junction, between the high school and the K-8 district, we would have had to cut almost $1.3 million. And in Essex Town, it would have been almost $1.4 million. And then just another piece of information, 8-cent tax rate reduction. Some people may not know what that means. To put it into context, it's 1 cent is a decrease of, would be a decrease of $10 for every 100,000 in property. So an 8-cent reduction, and if you apply that to maybe $250,000 worth of property, that would be a $200 reduction for that household, assuming there's not an income sensitivity factor there. So that's just what I put together. The other thing that I did mention in the fourth note is another thing that we didn't have in 2004 was the incentives, not only the tax incentive, but we also didn't have any kind of transitional grant. And due to the unique aspect of what we would be looking at, we'd be eligible for 2 different $150,000 grants. One, because it would reduce the number of SUs or SDs by 1 in the state. And then the other is because it would be classified
Transition.
as a
Transition grant.
transition grant, but I'm trying to think of the 2 categories. It's one is reducing the number of SUs, SDs, and the other is, I guess, just merging, an SU merger. So that's $150,000 each, and then on each one of those, you can use up to $20,000 for a study or legal fees related to the study. So,
Does the legislation have any kind of a timeline or deadline on it to be able to
Yes.
receive the, and what is that?
the red
July
has to be
1st.
formed, meaning you have to have your vote, you have to have a board in place for the red by July 1st, 2017.
Okay.
Which would be your FY18 budget.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Grant.
Sure. So any other questions on that or anything to start out with for the budget, FY16 budget? Okay.
I'm just gonna advocate again that maybe we don't get locked into the 1% idea, but maybe the 1% for capital.
For capital?
For guidance, but that can come later for the board to kind of set.
If a red were to be formed, it would be a perfect time to have a much higher percentage than 1%, because of that tax rate thing. Because I am a little nervous about, you have an 8-cent tax rate, but rate reduction, but the next year it's only 6 cents. So for people with a very short memory, they may forget that 8 cents and just see that you've actually gone up 2 cents. And so it may be good if you were to do something like that in that first year to maybe have some one-time costs so that the tax rate isn't going up that second year.
Yeah,
But-
I was wondering in my mind, what if it was 2,468, which basically could,
Yeah.
potentially give you a leveling of your tax burden out for 4 years to kind of give it. Is there any? That cliff is going to be problematic.
Yeah, each year, and luckily it's only 2 cents each year. I think that anybody who goes through this process, assuming somebody does, I think you would have to really make sure that you show an apples-to-apples comparison
Yep.
and revert back to what the tax rate would have been without that 8-cent reduction whenever you're showing it the next year, and then try to show that it's a benefit each year. Say $1.52. And then we had that 8-cent reduction. This year it's $1.53, and we have this 6 cent reduction. But it will be a challenge.
Hopefully, we would see through the process, so some efficiencies gained.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of arguments that you can make as far as a red go. I mean, one argument is that we're not one of these violators out there with a low teacher to student to teacher ratio. We don't have small schools grants. We don't have a lot of these things that are driving expenses out there. And so one might say, well, if you did something like this, maybe you buy some time for those things to start normalizing in other areas The other one is maybe you also buy some time for the economy to improve and for the grand lists to start increasing, those kinds of things. So yeah, a lot to consider. It'd be exciting if we could consider it during the budget development, but like I said, it's the timeline won't let us really deal with it then. Although it is a discussion that I think needs to continue on.
Yes.
Oh, and I guess the other potential is that the legislature did pass the House last year as far as trying to enforce mergers, and it made it through the House, but it didn't make it to the Senate. If something like that happened, the danger is that it could be mandated, and maybe that tax incentive might not be part of the equation anymore. So it's another thing. Although, if that does make it all the way through, that would be a real. I'm sure that it would be a very controversial issue going through the legislature if they did try to do that. At any rate.
Well, we're expecting the tax impact conversation to be troublesome throughout the state again this year.
Yes.
And I think having some viable options to study and look at and explore is prudent in these times. And hopefully we'll begin having some community conversation about their interest in exploring these opportunities. Certainly the incentives are making it quite attractive at this time. And I have to say, just today, just before I came, I had a principal call and say a family just moved to Essex town, and now they have to move their child from the village schools to the town. And that happens so frequently. It's so disruptive to children and their education when they get uprooted because families move and think they might even still be in Boundary, and sometimes don't even know because they have an Essex Junction address. Sort of happened to our chair and Prudential Committee at one time. So there's, I appreciate the tax incentives and the study grants. But, there's another dialogue to be had on the benefits to students when we don't, and an identity in our community that wouldn't look split anymore. To be whole and unified surely could bring some great assets and clarity for our taxpayers and for our students and families. So it's a big conversation. I appreciate always our board's willingness to have engagement opportunities. The Westford board is meeting on November 3rd to have that community dialogue, and we'll be waiting for the November 4th results to see how Chittenden East decides through their vote. The PC board is looking to set a time, and maybe it makes sense to join together to have an event where we could have a dialogue and garner some interest and get some feedback from our community about helping inform this board and all of our boards whether we should study. I think if we are going to go in that direction, it's important to understand a timeline. So we're putting together sort of a timeline where we work backwards from July 1st, 2017 formed, and what we'd have to do, what's that process look like. And it really would be prudent if we could have the vote by our boards at their December meetings. So really focusing in on November as a time for the conversation. If you don't feel like that's enough time for the community dialogue, maybe January, but we're really starting to push out on that timeline. And there's as Grant is talking, for 2017, that's next year's budget. This would be your last budget, so that budget begins right after the
January.
vote in April. So there's a lot of work that goes on over the summer and preparing for that. So it's going to be a tricky time period. But I think that I think it's exciting for us to just consider the opportunities that could be present. I think the most difficult thing is the courage to take a risk and do something different in our governance model. I think that's hard. I think it makes people in communities feel vulnerable sometimes. And how we can continue to support open conversations and trust and confidence to help that dialogue along is going to be crucially important.
I also think this board could be excellent spokespeople for this, because you've lived at the union since '94.
Yeah, you made it. You're the living example of what
Success.
unity can bring to students through
Yep.
scope of one school, and depth and breadth of program that comes from that. So this is a place where unified is a shining example. So that was sort of agenda topic, and just for
Number
people,
8.
yeah, number
Yep.
8, just for people to know in the orgs, we cited again a place that you can go for information from the 2004 study. All of the articles are listed there. There's an especially important final plan that they developed for review. I think that knowing what those 16 articles are, that it's a process that's in law for us to follow, would be helpful. Just so you're refreshed on what it means, and it can begin the dialogue. It's going to just be important. So please review that.
Okay. Thank you. Next topic, our wellness policy, is that?
Yeah, Grant and Kathy, are you good? Do you-
Yes.
Good.
Good to
Thank you
go.
very much.
Yeah,
you.
thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question? Did we want to talk about November meeting, having it as an agenda item, or did that come later?
Well, let's hold off when we go on to future agenda items.
great.
Item 12 there,
Sure.
Liz. That'll be
Sure.
good. Okay. Item 6 is our first reading of the wellness policy. It's included in the orgs. Policy J10. The, it wasn't clear to me what the difference is in the different colored texts that are in there. Which is, I'm assuming it's like a change notice. Some of these have been added, some of them have been changed. Who is there someone, Superintendent
Brian.
DeNova or Brian, can you address
Yep.
what those things are in J10?
Yeah, so just as background, you know that we've been working, our wellness policy is, because of federal regulations, has needed to be updated. It's been somewhat prescriptive of what that needs to include. The policy subcommittee's been working on it for a few months and has leaned heavily upon the educational leadership team, as well as the CSHT,
Comprehensive School Health Committee.
what she just said. The this was reviewed and passed at first reading by the CCSU board, now comes here. And these changes are changes that came into place since the first circulation to the CCSU board. So these aren't necessarily changes to us, since this is our first reading of it, but they're tracking changes since the first time it was distributed to the SU board. Our requirement is to look at policy, though this policy is pretty wide-reaching. We have asked administration to draft procedures that would go along with them. And like many of our policies, we're trying to move a lot of the language that is variable or specific or detailed into procedure rather than having it in policy. I believe it allows us to be more flexible and address issues. So we will not, in this first reading process, this is an action item, we aren't taking any action on the procedure. The procedure is only there for your information. It is the policy that we'd be acting on.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? So this is a motion to approve policy J10 at first reading? Is it?
I know it was marked as an action item. I think the action was just not a motion, but instead if there was any recommendations to get them back to the policy committee. If this board had any changes or.
Okay.
Because really it's the SU board.
It's coming through the SU, yes.
That will be reading at second reading. I will say, at our last educational leadership team meeting, we reviewed the policy together. Principals have been invited to provide feedback to policy and procedures. And then I vetted both the policy and the procedures in the CCSU weekly. So our entire school community has had an opportunity to see this. It's really important with this policy that there's community dialogue.
Required.
And it's required. So there's been a lot of vetting of this, and in turn I've seen nurses reposting pieces of it for faculties and calling their attention to it, and I think that the suggestions that are coming in will go to policy, which is meeting on the 22nd, I think, of October. So they'll have it in time to make any necessary revisions before the SU board meeting on the 27th.
Mm-hmm.
It's a quick turnaround, but I think it's been good because it kept us focused on this particular policy process.
So having no motions then for this, as this is CCSU, not U46 actions, please, review the J10 that's here. Feed any questions, comments, concerns. Actually, could go to Brian,
Yeah.
but as member of our policy committee, but also we do have a CCSU board meeting next Monday evening. And if there is something that we should know before second reading at CCSU, you could feed it back to myself or Brian or Al, who's not here tonight, but is also a member of that CCSU board. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Next, the Vermont School Board Association Regional Meeting Report. I did have some, I thought I had that data with me. I was able to attend that meeting. It was the 1st of October at Milton High School. And Secretary of Education, Secretary Holcomb, came and presented to us, to the members who were there. It was a rather large, it's probably, this is my 4th or 5th year of going to the regional VSBA. It was the first one that I've attended at Milton, though. The others had been in in Winooski. And I dare say it was probably 4 or 5x the participants that were there this time than what we had seen I had seen in the past. And maybe because it was a wider aperture of audience who was there, it just wasn't like focused in on Chittenden County, but it was Franklin County, it was Grand Isle, representatives from, certainly all the districts far and right, even some up into the kingdom. There were some representatives there, and a very interesting presentation from the secretary regarding some of the common trends that were going on amongst the school districts in the state of Vermont, and some of the challenges that districts statewide are facing. We've touched on some of them here earlier when we talk about unified unions, for example, and what's happening statewide on that initiative was discussed. And, but then some of the unique local challenges that the districts have in terms of understanding what that meant. And I'll get a little editorial here. It made me come to appreciate more what we have here in Chittenden Central, and actually maybe in greater Chittenden County than perhaps some of the other districts that have some real challenges that they have to face. Real challenges with small districts, declining enrollment. It's not an easy nut to crack, and I don't envy either what our AOE has to deal with, or what our communities have to deal with, what the legislature has to deal with in terms of addressing some of these real issues. It was interesting, some of the charts that were presented with per pupil charges saying being constant, but a per pupil charge, say approximately $14,000 a year for a student in a large district such as ours, compared to a $14,000 a year cost for a student in a small district, and you see what the academic offerings are for the students, and the opportunities that they have to succeed is just it's significant. And it was, to that end, I thought it was very eye-opening to see what was happening. And then we had some breakout sessions then where we went to talk about various topics. We had 3 questions. I'm trying to remember what they were, of which we only had time for 2 before the evening
Ideas
drew
for
to a close.
sharing
Oh, yes,
staff
Liz, you were
and-
there, but yeah,
I was,
please
yep.
chime in.
Ideas for sharing resources across communities was one of them. There were 3 questions. We only got to 2 of them. So one of them was ideas for sharing resources across school districts and unions. And the second one, I don't remember. What that one was. School choice, we were talking about transportation and issues around what that looks like if you move towards more sharing of services and consolidation, and transportation was big in that conversation.
So again, I apologize, I do have the materials that were passed out, and I do believe that they're available online too.
Yes,
At the SBA.
the situation analysis is online at the VSBA site, and it's also on your board site, posted there.
Right.
Rebecca Holcomb's last regional group, I think, meets this Wednesday, and after that, her slides will be available. And they are, I really appreciate her use of data and looking at patterns and sort of showing that swath in the state that keeps it reappearing with the same pattern. And mentioning what Jack said, she showed a school schedule for a student in a small school, and then a school schedule of a student in a larger school, and the breadth of programs and opportunities are exponential. in some places. So, you know, it's concerning when you think of it through the lens of equity. You know, we have an equitable education tax rate, but are we providing equitable opportunity? It's a hard conversation.
All right. So, it would be interesting then next week down at Lake Moray, right,
Yes.
is the VSBA retreat, 2 days. I think, Brian, are you planning on going? Liz, are you
I'm
planning?
going only on Friday.
Going only on Friday?
Right.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to go one day, but I
Okay.
haven't been able to confirm it.
I have to believe that some of these themes and topics that came up at the regional meetings are gonna be explored in depth more down at the annual retreat down there at Lake Moray. And so I would encourage, the board members to really dig in and get to know some of our colleagues from outside of our immediate area here, because it's interesting challenges that they all face. And like I said, we have our own challenges too. That we have to face. It's different strokes for different folks, and they you really get a bigger perspective, even on a small state like Vermont, of what the capabilities and educational opportunities are for our students. And I just personally want to say too, I haven't lost sight when I hear these things of it really is all about the students. There's a lot happening in the news about other things that are happening in our educational system right now that I never hear the word student being mentioned. And to be able to get some educational excellence for our students, particularly at the high school level, to be both career and college ready to go forth is really the good work that we do here on this board, and appreciate the work that you do to make that happen. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox here, but
That's good.
anything else about that VSBA regional meeting? We've talked, I don't know if we need to go back and readdress the Unified Union. The principals' reports were included in the org notes, again, in the efforts of trying to streamline what we're doing here. We won't ask the principals to read those reports, but do we have any questions first for Director Travers from CTE? Bob, I don't know if there's any additional comments that you would like to make.
Just two quick things. Core planning team, I listed as October 27th. That's obviously Wednesday, October 22nd.
Okay.
And I failed to list the Vermont Teacher of the Year presentation at UVM on October 22nd. So that's this Wednesday.
That's
and
right.
That's right.
Are you both planning?
I'm there.
Are you planning
I-
to
I-
attend?
I
You
can't.
Brian, can you attend?
I'm sorry,
Outstanding teacher at UVM.
on what day?
It's
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
It's coming up quick.
It's
Like
after our
3:30.
core planning team meeting.
Right after the whole day.
Right after the whole day.
In fact,
Yeah,
we're going to have to leave early to get there.
Yeah,
I'm gonna, no.
no, okay, that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's fine.
I
That's
just wanted to
fine,
point that out.
we'll be there.
The other big news I'd just like to say quickly is that the Agency of Education contacted us a couple weeks ago to look into studying whether we could offer a mechatronics program or not.
What program?
A mechatronics program.
What's a mechatronics?
So mechatronics is a combination of electrical engineering, robotics, hydraulic systems, mechanical engineering, and programmable logic control systems. It's the technology that companies like Husky, Keurig, Hazlet strip casting are learning to rely on. It's training the technicians to maintain the equipment. Instead of having 10 or 15 techs on the floor running the equipment, you'd have 1 or 2 engineering training technicians to take care of the equipment. We went up to North Country Career in Newport, which has got about a year and a half into a project for a mechatronics program, to see their facilities and their equipment and talk to their teachers. I'm working on it with Jim Durmeyer and Robin Lane, because the offering has to be a 9 through 14 offering. So we've got to put together a team to help us study the feasibility and lay out the program of study. I think it's something that is really in our wheelhouse. We are seriously considering offering it as a third section of our engineering suite. We could even call it a CT STEM Academy. One of the drawbacks is that the physical space we have is pretty limited. So I may be asking a few of you some what-if questions going forward about physical space on the campus. And I think that's it. What we do have working for us is Skill Tech already offers certification programs in PLC, programmable logic controls, machining, SolidWorks, electrical engineering, and welding. So I think we're pretty well poised to bring it into the local workforce development end of things. So more to come on that, but that didn't make it into the principal's report. That's
Okay.
something you should know we're working on.
Well, program counts, is that something we can get next? Don't you also do your counts?
Yes, I can
Do
email
that.
those to you tomorrow, yeah.
That'd be great if you
Yep.
just
Yep,
either send them through Ben or what.
yep,
But
absolutely.
this should be the number we could start to plug in to help us understand what the 6 semester average is?
Yes, yep, I've
Great.
got it sitting on my desk.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Principal Reardon, anything that's not in your report?
Just a couple things. I think overall, just the start of the school year has been really positive from just about every stakeholder's perspective. I referenced it in the report, but I just want to comment on it. I thought it was a really good opportunity that we had jointly to host Dale Earnhardt Jr. here, and I thought multiple students and adults really got a lot out of that experience. And I just received a disc from Beltrami Studios that took photo ops for each participant, adult and student, with Dale when he was here for 3 different meeting opportunities. So I just feel the overall climate's really positive, and it's been a good start to the year. In terms of items not in the report, a couple things percolating in mathematics based on Common Core as we're looking at program of studies offerings for next year. Looking at creating a semester-long, non-leveled probability and statistics offering for all kids earlier in their high school experience as a result of the emphasis on Common Core, and also knowing that Prob and Stats is useful in many other disciplinary opportunities, so that perhaps they could get deeper in some science courses and social studies courses. That's point number 1. Point number 2, discussion of some, based on student feedback coming out of the Fab Lab and other STEM opportunities, and even speaking with some students out of the engineering courses with Mr. Durmeyer, having more coding opportunities for kids earlier. And that seems to mean a demand that just about everybody in industry, from Marion Lawler at IBM, has been saying across the board in terms of exciting kids about math and wanting them to go further. This is a good place to start. So those are some items that are being worked on locally here as a way to expand offerings for next year. In terms of high impact experiences, I think the board should know that we've hosted, and they just flew out yesterday, a contingent from Japan that visited us for a week. And Jill Prado's good work with VIA through the Roland Foundation and your continued support with some local funds, we currently have 25 students and adults from France and Belgium that are here. So whenever we have the chance to go abroad and we have the opportunity to host, I think it's really relevant and important for our kids to connect learning in the whole global economy piece. Women in Science, as I included, another outstanding start. We also piggybacked with CTE and the Women Can Do offering last Thursday. Thanks,
Nice.
Bob, for coordinating that with us. We had five young ladies participate down at Randolph. It was a wonderful day. Dual enrollment continues to flourish. We have talked about what it would cost, and we'll have more information in terms of funding the ACT locally, recognizing that plan is probably going away. This was the last year we were able to get them to provide the test, and PSAT will probably revert back to a Saturday offering because there's nothing else to coincide with the PSAT test next year since plan is going away. So if we were to do an ACT, we've got that kind of factored in, and with the others going away, it wouldn't be a really negative impact with our budget, because it would almost be like a real allotment of resources, a slight increase, but not large to say the least. And in terms of where we stand with our New England Secondary School Consortium, I have a meeting this Friday in Boston, which I'll be attending, the League of Innovative Schools, and it continues along the lines of proficiencies, personalizations, and pathways. So I thought I would share some information from the consortium, which we're members with, in terms of how does proficiency-based learning work. It's a single sheet, and then the second
Thank you.
item going around will be what is proficiency-based grading? How does that work moving forward? Desired outcomes from this Friday's meeting are to connect and network with other schools throughout New England in terms of arranging either Skype conversations or actual visits to schools in Maine or perhaps Rhode Island, depending upon what meets our needs. We also have some visits planned with high schools within state in terms of, what did I short you on, Gary? Was it the grading?
Yes.
I have more, sorry. Actually, keep them going. From high schools within state, especially with the PLPs,
But they're short.
in terms of Virgins, CVU, and Rutland. We have a task team that's going to be making visits to get insight in terms of what other schools in the state are doing to meet the 2015 deadline. And we are well underway in terms of, which was alluded to in the report, in terms of action plan work. We're making good progress and continue to forge ahead with some good work and some excellent teacher leadership moving forward. So I have a real good feeling of where we're at. It's real positive across the board.
It's great.
Proficiency-based stuff, so we're moving towards it. Was that correct in remembering that you said that the current 7th graders would be the first ones to go through it?
Yes.
So that means, now they are the first ones to go through all 4 years? So in other words, if they're 8th grade now, they will go through the traditional grading?
Yes.
Or, so they won't switch over the last couple of years?
Correct. So that brings up a good point, Gary. I'm glad you said that. In that, we also have, as part of our November 24th faculty in-service, in the morning we have Angela Hardy, who's going to be joining us from the New England Secondary School Great Schools Partnership with our faculty, working on the proficiency-based learning, grading, reporting, and graduation requirements. And she has been highly sought after based upon a team that heard her present in Boston last year. So our faculty's really energized. I also would encourage any board member who is free that morning to join us in the auditorium, November 24th, to listen to the information being presented. I also would invite any board member at a January 23rd New England Secondary School Consortium meeting, or in March at the big one down in Boston. If you would like to attend, let me know, and I'd be happy to have you join us. Because there are also other board members that attend, and you could obviously, throughout New England, and you would have that opportunity just like we do, which is very positive. So, long story short, in terms of when we want to start engaging our community, because you're right, the current 7th graders, when they're freshmen, that's going to be by the EQS, that's when this is gonna start to occur in real time, as it is now this year in respective middle schools, in terms of proficiencies.
And I'm not sure that's understood. I went to an open house at a middle school, and they knew it was coming, but they weren't sure when, as they're, of course, struggling with everything new as well. So I'm not saying anything bad about it, but it was, I felt like actually speaking up and saying, well, actually, but I wanted to make sure that I had it correct first.
Well, at a recent faculty meeting, I did a crosswalk with our faculty in terms of what Act 77, the Ed Quality Standards, and our action plan, how they all fit together.
Mhm.
And it was an excellent exercise, because a lot of folks who have had access to the information perhaps didn't see that it's a lot closer than it appears. So I think people, at least I know, high school staff are in a much better place of understanding.
Yeah.
The other work that Amy Cole's been doing with our teacher leaders in the curriculum content areas, the curriculum mapping, that's a really critical foundational piece of work that is going on to prepare us for those conversations moving forward in terms of proficiencies, and how the grading and the grad requirements, how that's all going to play out moving forward. So certainly more to come, but there's some good work being done to get us to that point.
Can I just clarify, so the current 8th graders that will be 9th graders next year at EHS,
Yes.
it's not completely ruled out that they won't be proficiency graded? Or is
Well, the plan is, with the timeline we have, is the freshmen entering EHS 2016,
Current
which would be the
seventh
class of 2020. That's when that transition will occur.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't want to proclaim that the
Right.
8th graders would right now, because I'm not sure we're at that point.
I'm just thinking, as you move that grade up, we don't work in, really pretty quickly, students can start to take classes outside of a grade silo. So you could have a freshman, in 2016, taking a Clay 1 with a whole bunch of sophomores, juniors, and seniors. That teacher, I would just think that there'd be some gravitational force so the teacher isn't grading one student on proficiency standards and all the other students are graded in a 70 to 100 scale. It could
Yeah,
get-
and actually, there's not to confuse the issue anymore, but our conversation with colleagues throughout New England, there are many schools that are using hybrid models because of the fact, and I think we can appreciate this, having a traditionally very successful high school, the community conversation has been somewhat difficult to have without the comfort of a number or a letter in addition to the proficiency. So my networking has shown in all New England states, including Massachusetts, who likes to remain separate from the other 5, there are hybrid models. I'm just saying what it is.
Especially those from Arlington and
Yeah.
Cambridge.
I'm growing up.
Thanks, Bob.
A couple of decades.
We'll strike that part of the video. But no, there are hybrid models,
Yeah.
especially as schools transition.
Yeah.
Because it's an education of more than the students and the staff. It is the whole
Yeah.
conglomeration.
I could definitely see graduation requirements maybe being one of those things that you're grandfathered in somehow,
Yes.
but grading within a classroom that may have all 4 grades represented and different numbers, and
Yeah.
it could be, that
Yeah.
could be quite an exercise.
That's a very
Nice
tactful way of putting
it.
Yes, I would agree. But obviously, much more to come, and you're all invited to any of these opportunities.
Good, thank you.
Just have a couple things I want to ask you, not really related to a principal's report.
Okay.
Since I have your attention. One is, have you got any feedback about our entrance from students and community? And
Yes.
what's the status of our doors? Our
Okay.
doors, so, yeah.
So the first part, all positive. In particular with the first group, I think I shared with you the reunion group that came in and it was all dirt and everything was gone and they had no idea what had happened. Then I explained what the plan, and they were all, oh, that's great. It needed to have been done a while ago, is what some people said, but we can say that, so it's all positive. And just so that you know, we're being a bit conservative and taking the ropes down around only because of what we get every time we mow the lawn in terms of how soft it is. Because of all the excavating that had to go on to take all the root systems out of the 40-year-old trees. So most recently, when the lawn was mowed last week, of course last week it was 80, I know, but when they were pushing the hand mower, it's still pretty soft. So the recommendation was, obviously we didn't sod it, we seeded it, which is fine, but they feel it needs a little more tender, loving care through the winter, and then when it thaws in the spring, then we'll take the ropes off. But the kids have been very respectful
Yeah.
of it, and you know, when I tell them the reason why, it's all okay, that makes sense. So they're anxiously awaiting the opportunity because it's wonderful with the benches. I have not had a negative comment at all from any community member on that. It's very positively received. And your question on the doors, you mean the doors in
Yeah.
the front entrance?
Yeah, when will they be replaced, or where are we at with that?
I'll have to check with our property services director on that. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame is for that.
I was invited to a meeting with Grant and Bruce and John Alden from Scott and Partners, and I believe they're working. I think the timeline that we'd asked when we did it was for them to give us something at our, is it November or
Yeah.
December meeting?
November.
November. So that's the timeline they're working towards.
It's
is-
close, but I didn't have that update.
Mhm.
But that would fit then. Good.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Rob, you did include one note, that 32 students out of 1,250 hadn't yet signed the handbook, right? And you're working to get these additional signatures,
Yep.
you're making progress on that?
Yeah, and some of them, actually, there were a few students that moved in since, September 10th was the advisory that we did it. We've had a few students move in since then, and there were a few, you know, throughout the course of a day, you have X number of absences, and then
Right.
since then, there have been activities planned in advisory, so they hadn't had a chance to get through that. So
Okay.
yes, there is work being done to make
Okay.
sure that all students are signing off on that.
All right, very good, thank
Yep.
you. Okay, moving on, the CCSU board update. We had our first board meeting of the year back on the 29th of September, and had a presentation from administration, and Amy Cole and Kim Gawar, is that?
Gaywar.
Gaywar, on the admin.
Good.
I'm looking at I got a little cheat sheet here, but nevertheless, it's the meeting minute notes, the tool that we're using for tracking student progress. And it is at the CCSU level because it is really a cross-district platform that's going on here, with K through 5 data, ELL data, reading and math assessments, etc. It was one thing that was presented here. It was part of there's a 3-year plan for admin. We're in the beginning of year 2 right
Correct.
now, okay? And we'll make a decision at the CCSU level if it's something that we want to continue. Again, my comment is I think it's highly probable we as a SU board will want to see the momentum that we're building up to continue on. So we also talked about, similar to what Grant gave us tonight for U46, we had a CCSU year-end report and then a FY16 budget outlook. I won't go into a lot of details. The minutes are available online. You can take a look and see what's going on there. We also, as we've talked here tonight about a second reading for J10, we had first reading of J10, and we talked about then, spent a lot of time talking about the annual work plan and what the task teams are that we're going forward here. And you know, a couple suggestions from an SU level here is that the task teams, which we know are policy, leaders at work, negotiations, and communications, understanding what the charge or charter is for each of those task teams, and then the organization of those teams has to be defined so that there's minutes being taken, agendas are set, deliverables are made, that are happening, and that's where the SU board would like to see those improvements or continuous improvements occur on those various task teams. Let's see what else. We also talked about the unified union information, which we talked about here tonight. And then we also spent a little bit of time, and this is an important consideration for CCSU, on the status of the superintendent evaluation. To that end, it's the SU board that evaluates the superintendent. We want to get that superintendent evaluation wrapped up for next Monday's CCSU board meeting. There's a series of executive committee meetings happening this week, Wednesday this week, Friday this week, and Monday next week prior to the SU, to make sure that we take the evaluation to the SU board for approval and deliver it to the superintendent for signature and memorialization, along with then using the annual work plan for development of next year's evaluation process. So a lot of work happening there. If I would encourage, again, those of you who don't serve on the SU board, if you at the very least take a look at the meeting minutes, you'll get a good appreciation of the work that's going on there. Brian, am I missing anything, or?
No, I'm not sure. Does that meeting on Wednesday need some input? There was an email by Michael today about needing input or having somebody. I'm not sure of the process. I'm outside of it.
I have not seen that email yet, so I can't. But I will double check. Certainly, any evaluation things will happen in executive session. So whatever we discuss would happen there. But let me look between now and when we go into executive session and see what needs to occur there. Okay. Any other CCSU board updates? Again, next meeting is next Monday. Here. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on. The consent agenda. The warrants have been working their way around the table. We have approved meeting minutes, approval of a letter of resignation, and a bank resolution signature approval, which I have right here in front of me. Are there any items that we need to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Liz. I'll second that motion to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Just for the board's information, and I'm saying this at the 10th hour of this meeting, I did get a text message from Al Bombardier today. He had informed me he wasn't feeling well and wasn't going to be able to attend the meeting. So, get well soon, Al. Future agenda items. Item 12. Liz, this is where we can chime in with what you would like to see included.
Okay. I would like to see us talk more about the red, and we talked about at our communications team meeting, which wasn't wasn't a quorum, so what we did meet, and, it became clear that one of the things that we need to do is get on the same page as a board, and everybody needs to be brought up to speed about what that will look like, what a red is, and what that will look like. And I think we need to devote some time to the agenda to really figure out where we all stand on whether we want to study this more as an option for us. It's really just approving a study at this point, and I would like to see that on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Any other future agenda items that we want to have included?
At one time, weren't we gonna have a presentation about performance-based and grading and all that, or someone come and explain it in further detail?
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be.
When were we gonna have that?
Have it in November.
Okay.
We don't have a November board meeting.
I thought it was supposed to be like August or September. I mean, nothing was ever settled, it was just,
So, Judy,
Like
did we
about the
talk about
grading
scheduling
and
my
just-
time
I had a-
outside of our regular scheduled?
Are you talking about grading or the scale or the proficiency?
well, I think it's all of it. My understanding of it was like last June that someone was gonna come in and talk to us all about what this was and why it's good and how it's different.
I had an initial presentation at the last meeting.
Right. We did have
Oh,
that.
so I wasn't here?
I don't know, were you?
God, that's terrible. I don't even know if I was even here now. Strike that from the record, for God's sake. Oh, I think I have bigger problems. Either I was here and didn't pay attention, or I wasn't here and I don't know it.
I think the plan
Nice.
for December board meeting was the science kneecap review.
Ah, that's terrible.
And Kelly Hill and Joe Chase, I think, were.
Yeah, they're gonna be, that's
Really?
December, yeah, they're
Yeah.
on track.
Have somebody come in.
So your next board meeting, to answer Liz's
That's what I
question,
thought. Okay, but I'm not crazy.
No, you're not.
is
You're right.
December 15th,
Is the next board meeting?
board meeting. So
So-
you have between now and December 15th, if you wanted to have a special meeting.
About the timeline is
Oh, about the
really
red?
tight.
Yeah.
If we need community input and if we wanna move towards approving a study of all boards to discuss what this red would look like, the November meeting, I think, is really important for boards to have, and we don't have a scheduled meeting, so I don't know if we wanna look at our calendars and schedule one. Because I think it's really important, first,
Right.
before we go out into the community with what this means, we talked about being really clear internally about what that would look like, so that when the community asks questions, we sort of are all up to speed on what that would look like.
Mhm.
But that would be a special meeting.
And we've determined it's each individual board that needs to,
Well,
it's not each
I think
board
it's
advises
I
the
think-
CCSU.
Yes. Yes, each individual board would vote to study.
Okay.
And because the money is included in the grant, we don't need our communities to vote, just board members for the study, but board members wanna be informed by their community.
So each board's gonna do their own study?
No.
No.
There'll be one
But-
study, but each board would need to give permission for
To the
us to enter into applying for the grants and formulating a study committee. Which the last time was almost an 18-month process, but because we have so much rich information from the last study, that's why it's important to kind of review that, to have an opportunity to do this in a shorter time frame, so we're ready to be formed and voted on by,
January.
July 1st, 2017, it seems like a long time away, but it gets upon us quickly. So the sooner we can, and the reason why we didn't schedule a November board meeting or a September board meeting was because you wanted to have times in your calendar for engagement. So this is a perfect topic as far as engagement opportunity. The question is, should we schedule two, like one for this board or would you like to join the PC board?
I would think if we're gonna have a discussion about red, we might
Should
wanna
include
do it with
everybody.
the PC board and the
Westford board.
Westford board.
And-
Well-
And
Right?
ETSD
Is-
board.
I'm sorry, which boards did you say?
If we're gonna have a conversation about the red topic.
Right.
Wouldn't we want to talk about it with, I guess I shouldn't have said, what, would I say Westford? Or would this just be, this would be PC and us?
And Westford and
Mhm.
Essex Town.
And
Yeah.
Essex Town.
Right.
So I think I said that right? I said
Okay.
PC,
Mhm.
Westford and us,
Mhm.
together. It
Well,
seems kinda silly.
well-
And Essex.
And Essex
And
Town.
Essex.
Yeah.
That's 4, yes.
So.
Okay, then I'm misunderstanding. So what does us giving permission have to look like? So we're gonna give permission to do a study. So
Right.
how would we give you that permission? Would we talk about it and say, you now have our permission if we agree to do that? I'm just trying to understand the
Mhm.
process here.
Mhm. Right.
So-
It would be answering any questions board members would have,
Mhm.
and then boards would convene as a local board meeting, take a vote whether you're authorizing the superintendent and the boards to enter into the study of a red.
Okay.
So we can do it individually or
Well-
collectively. I know Westford for sure.
Then maybe it would be
Wanted.
jumping the gun, having a collective meeting if we need to talk as a board about if we're even gonna
Right.
give permission.
Right.
Right, and for
why
Westford, they
we wanted
wanted to
to-
definitely have their meeting in Westford for the conversation.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense, and I'm sure that Essex Town
And I think that's the same for them.
would want to have their own conversation.
And then where did the December timeline come in? What does December mean in this
So-
process?
The vote has to be, well, it's if you start at 2017 and
Mhm.
work backwards, you
Mhm.
get to about December. I can show
Okay.
you what that timeline looks like.
So in other words, we've gotta get moving on this.
That's the bottom line.
It's
So
timely.
start-
It's timely. It's also timely because when your budget comes out in January, those budget conversations across the state will be,
Is,
Difficult.
November 17th is a CCSU board meeting.
that it is.
That will be a large part of that meeting is gonna be budget, but is some of that meeting gonna be about red anyways?
Yes.
Is some of the meeting next Monday about red?
Oh my gosh, we have another
I think
acronym.
the red will be continued to be talked about as far as questions, but I wanted to have an
People are gonna do
opportunity to do a formal presentation on 153. What is exactly a red?
Yeah.
What are the questions? What is the timeline? What is in a package?
I just think of partly as a union high school, we're a little different in which
Yes.
we're asking people to sort of catch up to us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of, we like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This works when communities combine and create. So, I don't see us asking people too much. It's not like in that Westford, EJ,
Right.
Essex Town situation.
Right.
But we should be informed in case people ask us, what it's all about. So I was trying to think of some way that U46 could just latch on to an information opportunity, whether at PC or at CCSU or at Westford or Essex
I see what you're
Town.
saying. Yeah.
I'm not sure if our needs.
I see what you're saying.
But we could help advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I think our decision on whether we'd proceed with the study would show our position, but if those three communities are informed with some kind of public dialogue, our constituency becomes informed.
Because they're gonna, our
Right.
constituency's gonna benefit from this prospect.
Yes, so if we're
Outcome,
talking about
potential.
following the child from pre-K to 12, then we all are included in the conversation.
Right. That's
Right.
exactly the
This
way
is
to
good
look
for
at it.
everybody.
Right.
I mean, theoretically, bless you. So do we
So
wanna meet?
how do people feel about coming in, I hate to say this, at 5:30 before the CCSU board meeting? No, it doesn't work. I know that there's some dates out there that PC is taking under consideration. It would be helpful if I just let you know what date they land on. And then we could revisit it in the November budget. SU board meeting?
Yeah, if it would be valuable, we could try to align ourselves so that we could have a meeting to take a vote to support. You know, I don't know where everybody else is. If no one
Yeah.
else is crescendoing until December, then let us know that. But if we'd hold everything up,
Right.
then we could potentially figure out how to, like we did the other night, how to get a quorum, you know, and have. I mean, is there people that are opposed right now to the idea of studying?
On this board?
Yeah, or
No.
in attendance? I
No,
don't think there
no,
is.
yeah,
No, you're,
So
that's
it's
that's
not a
good
matter
point.
of if, to engage in this conversation, it's just a matter of when,
When.
you know, trying to, or if it's the will of U46 to man this up to our delegates on the CCSU board, that's another
That's another approach.
opportunity of how to engage this. I don't know, I echo what Brian said, is that we in U46 are probably unique amongst the districts in that we have gone through this unification. By very definition of our name, we're a union, of multiple districts here, and so I do see the need of doing something quickly, but I think that's more for our districts who are not unified yet. I could be wrong, but I also have been in contact with the Essex Town School District on this, just in terms of what their agendas are, what their schedule is. They're also trying to make a decision about when they want to add a red topic to their agendas, and we U46 should be aware of what's going on with them, just like we know what's happening with Prudential Committee in Westford. So I'm
And oh, sorry, Jeff.
no, I was going to say is I talked today with Kim Gleason, the chairwoman of the Essex Town School District. She and I would get together, have a conversation, at least from a schedule standpoint, by the end of next week, and I'm sure we're going to hear from the superintendent's discussions too, because this is a topic that's been ongoing between you and
Mark Andrews.
at Chittenden Town. So anyway, there's momentum there. Now we need to get that momentum and coalesce it into some real actions and
Yes.
make some deadlines,
Yes.
start executing a timeline for what needs to happen when.
Because this would be, I mean, yes, we already have all of the towns together under this roof per se, as far as when we're talking unification, but this is a bigger thing because it does really impact us, because like
It does.
the administration is all going, so
Right.
And the boards would
Yeah,
I mean,
the boards.
the governance,
yeah.
it's a change in
It's a
governance.
really big
Yep.
thing now.
It is.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a huge thing. I think it's just that first
We're just
bite of like,
authorizing the study.
do we wanna
Study,
study it so that we have
yes.
information to then share?
And,
Right.
and maybe the answer for our board already is yes, is what you're saying. Nobody here.
Yeah, the idea of
Studying
studying
it.
unification, I think is,
Yeah.
we're a union high school, we see some benefits in the idea. I mean, just studying it seems like I'm certainly in favor of studying it. I
Right.
haven't made any decisions
Right.
beyond that, but.
Right.
I'd hate to have us
That's-
get to somewhere where we're like at January or February because we're trying to line up how to
Right.
do something that might already have sort of the prevailing support,
Yep.
but we haven't figured out how to say it.
That's why a vote in December from all of our boards would then move us into the timeline
for
of,
January.
for January, where we'd have to talk, we'd need your support in recommending people for the study committee,
And a communications and outreach plan for
Right.
the greater community, so that we engage the community meaningfully from the beginning, and
Right.
what that looks like, and
Right.
how to execute that.
Hiring a consultant.
We've tapped a lot of key people for the core planning team.
We sure have.
Yeah, we have.
At the
Yeah.
same time period.
Yeah. Yep, so there's those things to take into consideration as well.
So circle back here, this came up as a future agenda item for a red, and what do we want to do with this? I don't want to boil the ocean on it right now, because we could, but it probably would not be time well spent. Let's put this on as a topic for our next meeting in December, and I know that there'll be more information forthcoming
And
between
maybe a
now and
vote
then.
at that meeting for this
Right.
two study.
Right.
So how about two, that's a great suggestion, thank you, Jack, and if I can just, I'll send out to all board members when the PC, and if I learn about UT's having their board meetings, you could attend those meetings if you wanted to,
Yep.
just to engage.
Yep.
Does PC have a meeting in November then?
That, they're working on forming one now.
Yes, we should be aware of what other districts are doing, and their public meetings we can certainly go and attend. The only thing I would caution each of us as board members, though, is that we go as a member of the public. We're not going to represent U46
Right.
or any, or speak on behalf of the board, because none of us have that authorization or that charter yet to have that discussion, so,
Thank you.
okay.
So science kneecaps?
Yep.
Grant will provide you with a little more information on budget, I'm sure.
With science kneecaps, the outcome and purpose there is for us to be more informed about this most recent round of testing, how it compares, and what are the takeaways administration has from them.
And also the transition to next-gen science standards and how future iterations of assessments will play into potential modifications of curricular offerings.
Okay.
Because that's another piece of it.
Yep, how it will play into
The science standards,
curricular
now
offerings.
next-gen science standards, how does that play out?
Okay. And, I mean, I think in it, that needs to either dispel or to address whether there's an issue, with, the gap
Yep.
in
Okay.
this last, I mean, I think it just, you
Yeah.
know, if it's dispelled or if it's addressed,
Okay.
one way or the other.
Yep.
Okay, any other future agenda items? If not, I'd like to move into executive session for the purpose of a personnel matter and a student matter. We can just do that unilaterally, right? Or do we have to take a motion to go into executive session? I don't recall.
I learned this evening that you have to take a vote to go into executive
Yes.
session.
Okay. So, I'll make the motion to move into executive session for the purpose of a personnel matter and a student matter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Gary. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So, let's take, we'll move into executive session, meet in the room next door in about 5 minutes. RETN, thank you for your work this evening. I think we're done for tonight. Okay, thank you.
All right.